Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to share with you this inlaid rainbow background that I created on this card. So I'm going to be using this brand new die set from Craft and Desert Divas. It is called Inside Scalloped Rectangles die. Now I'm going to be using all these different rainbow colors of cardstock, and I'm first going to start out with red. So I'm going in Roy G. Biv order here. So starting with the red and the largest die in the set, I'm going to go ahead and run this through my die cutting machine, and that's all I'm going to be doing with the red cardstock. So I'll just send this through, and the portion I need from this is that outer frame that it's created with the die. Now moving on to the orange, I'm going to go ahead and cut with that same largest die, and I'll go ahead and send this through my die cutting machine, but for this one I'm actually going to need that center portion of the die cut. So then I'm going to go ahead and inlay this next size down. This is the medium die in the set. I'll go ahead and inlay that right into the outer portion, or that inner portion of the die. And I'm just going to tape this in place with some painter's tape just to make sure that everything stays put while I die cut. Now this is one of those times when I could have sent both the larger and smaller die through at the same time and really done some true die cut inlay. Where you inlay another die into a larger die, but I wanted to go ahead and show you this process without doing two dies at once to confuse you. So there is that outer portion, and that is what I'm going to keep for my orange portion. Now I'm going to go back in with that middle-sized or mid-sized rectangle in the set, and I'll go ahead and run this through my die cutting machine with the yellow cardstock, and again I'm just going to need that frame. And here you can kind of see that rainbow effect starting to take place. Now for my next color, I'm going to go ahead and be moving on to the green cardstock. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be using that same middle die that I've been using the past 3 times now. I'll go ahead and run this through once, and this is another one of those times you could go ahead and do the inlay. And now I'm going to move on to the smallest rectangle. I'm going to lay that right inside the inner portion of that die cut that I got. And this is going to create my green piece in the rainbow. So I'll go ahead and lay that down. Make sure it's even on all the sides there. And then again, I'm going to use my painter's tape on this one just to hold everything in place so it doesn't shift around as I put it through my die cutting machine. Then when that comes out, I've got this great, it's almost like a little stamp. You know those die cuts that create like the outer edge of a stamp? That's what it looks like to me. And that is my green portion. Now moving on to the blue, I'm going to go ahead and run that same smallest die straight through with my blue and also with my purple cardstock. And I don't need to do any more die cutting other than that. I'll have the frame with the blue and the inner portion of that smallest die with the purple. And that's where I'm going to leave it. Now you can see I've got my rainbow here. I've got my red frame, the inner portion with my orange, then going down to that medium frame I've got my yellow, then the inner portion of that with the green, then the smallest frame with the blue, and finally I've got that inner portion that is purple, and that completes my rainbow. Now to put this all together, I'm going to be using a liquid glue, and I'm gluing everything to just a plain piece of white cardstock. You could use computer paper if you wanted a little bit thinner here. I wanted something stiffer to hold up to the weight of all this cardstock that's going on top of it. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting this together. I've started off with my red. I'm putting a layer of glue all the way around just to make sure everything stays in place. And then I'll go ahead and insert my orange, and everything just fits together perfectly. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together, except you're making a card in this case. Moving on to my yellow now, I'll go ahead and put some multimedia matte all the way around. Now, I would not suggest using a paper tape adhesive on this portion of the project. It just goes together a little bit easier when you use that liquid glue. You've got that little bit of playtime to move everything around. You can pull it up if maybe you get a little bit over the edge. You just want to use the liquid glue sparingly though, so you don't have a bunch gooping out on the sides. And that is why I'm using multimedia matte in this case. Because it dries to a matte finish, I'm not going to see any major goopage that's coming out. I don't think goopage is a word, but I'm using it as a word today. So I'm moving on to my blue frame there. And then finally, I'm going to go to that very center, which is all purple, and just put quite a bit of glue on there so everything stays nice and flat. And I put an acrylic block over that, let it dry for a few minutes. It doesn't take long for that glue to dry. Now, once that was all done, it was time to cut off the excess white paper around this. And I'm just using my paper trimmer. You could use long blade scissors if you wanted to. My paper trimmer was just a little bit quicker. Now, I am just going to cut off all 4 sides of this. And I use my wire guide just to make sure everything is lined up properly. And then I cut right up flush against the red. Now, if you do this with your paper trimmer and you find you can still see a little bit white, take your sanding block and just sand that away. Don't go back in with scissors or anything and try to get those teeny tiny slivers. Just use our sanding block and that should take care of the problem. Once that was done, I decided I wanted to make this into a shaker card. So I'm going to be using the rainbow die set from Craftin' Desert Divas to do that. Now, if you decide to do this, I just want to warn you that you want to give this a good few minutes to dry before you send this through your cutting machine. I didn't, and when I did, I had some goopage come out the sides, and it was quite a bit. I was able to get rid of a little bit of it and cover up the rest of it, but just a word of advice, let that glue dry underneath there. I got a little impatient. So for that shaker, I die cut the rainbow right in the center, and then I put my acetate down, and then also I filled out the rest of that panel with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive. Then I'm going to fill this shaker with some fairy dust sequins and the shimmer sequins from Craftin' Desert Divas. I thought it was very fitting to have a very bright rainbow background and then kind of the rainbow center shaker be all white, kind of a different take on the rainbow. So I filled that up very, very generously. And then I'm going to go ahead and start pulling up my adhesive backing paper on the adhesive. So I have quite a bit on here, as you can see, and I did fill out those corners around the rainbow just because I wanted this, when it did shake or when it settled, to still have a little bit of that rainbow effect while the sequins were settled in there, not just a regular rectangle. So I did put quite a bit of adhesive on the back of this just because there is so much wet glue on there, and I didn't want to flip this over onto a card base and risk it being off center. So I just put another piece of cardstock right on the back of there to finish off that shaker, lock in those sequins. Now I know they're not going to go anywhere, and now I can just flip the whole thing over. I've got this great panel that is now ready to go on an A2 card base. So I've got that backing paper on there now. I put more adhesive over the back of that just to make sure everything stays down, because this panel was getting a little bit heavy at this point with all the cardstock and the glue and the sequins and the fun foam and everything else. So it was a little bit heavy. So I went ahead and flipped that over, put that right down on top of an A2 side folding white card base that I had made myself. And then in that rainbow die set, you get these great clouds with some stitching on there. And of course, all the Craftin' Desert Divas die stitching do match, so I didn't have to go and search for matching stitching. I knew it matched. I grabbed it out of the set. I cut 2 of those with white cardstock, popped those up at both ends of the rainbow with some more fun foam and double-sided adhesive, and then I went ahead and die cut this flag banner from the Flag Banners die set. Again, it's got stitching on it. I knew the stitching matched because all of the stitching matches. And then I pulled out the Weather Gnome stamp set, and it's got this great sentiment in it that says, "You color my world," which I thought was very fitting for this card. So I'm going to pop that right on top of the flag banner, and I'm going to stamp it with just some black dye ink. And I'm going to stamp that right in the center of this flag banner. Now, this is one of the banners in the set that does have like 2 folding backs on it, so it creates this great dimensional banner. So I'll go ahead and fold these back and just use my bone folder to go ahead and give them a nice crease in there. You can see that first side folded back so easily. It's got these great score lines in it. They're almost like perforated lines, and they just fold so nice and easily. You really don't need anything other than your bone folder or your finger to make sure they're nice and sharp creases. I put some adhesive on the back of that. I'll go ahead and lift the backing paper up and then fold in those 2 in fishtail banners. Then I put some more fun foam and double-sided adhesive on the back of that. I'll go ahead and lift the backing paper off of that one and then put this right at the top of that rainbow. And you can see I had a little bit of squish glue up there. My banner is going to cover that up very nicely so I don't have to do any sort of scraping off of glue. Once I had that on though, that finished off the card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and this technique, and I hope you'll give it a try too. As always, I'm going to leave you with this close-up of the card and a few pictures as well. On the left side of your screen, you're going to see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to the supply list for this card, and the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!